Riptide, Riptide, Riptide. The most in-demand bachelor in all of Wrath, believed to be terminally falling upon hard times, but perhaps no more. When I picked up this deck, I didn't really expect much other than fun and X amount of reasons as to why I lost, but I actually think Riptide is a phenomenally underrated hero just now, and doesn't see the level of play that he truly deserves. His two worst matchups by far are Dromai and Icelander, and Icelander will become easier once Lexi hits Living Legend, as we get Bullseye Bracers back. Icelander herself is close to Living Legend too, so hopefully we don't have to worry about her for too much longer. When it comes to Dromai, if I put my Riptide hat on, all I can hope for is support for hurting dragons, or Dromai flying into Living Legend along with her shiny new book. To back up my case with some flimsy evidence, if we take a look at the Talishar win rates for Riptide in September, we see he's sitting at a modest 47% win rate across the board. On just this evidence alone, he already sits comfortably above several other heroes that see far more competitive play than our boy. But let's just consider the fact that Dromai and Icelander are extremely popular, and so will be skewing that percentage heavily as well, so there's definitely something to work with here. With this in mind, I invite you, yes you, to gaze upon Cheerio Riptide. For anyone unfamiliar with the term, Cheerio is used to describe decks with lots of zero cost attacks. This is a heavy aggro build, but we have multiple ways to hurt our opponent and our turn cycles can vary wildly. On some turns we will go wide like Alexi and hit 3 arrows buffed with the Rain Razors, and on others we will swing with a Searing Shot for 16 like Azalea. This is actually a huge advantage, as it means you can change your play style mid-game to suit the matchup better, especially when up against fatigue, as you can set up an appropriate pitch stack. Unlike the other two ranger heroes in the game, Riptide does not mind blocking either. This is thanks to his ridiculous synergy with the ranger traps, and his two card hands are easily the best in the game. If you play a Lace with Blood Drop and fire a Searing Shot, you are threatening 10 damage off of just 2 cards. So an easy turn cycle for him is to block up to 9, with maybe some traps going off as well for added damage and bonuses, and then playing a buff and an arrow for follow-up. We'll jump into the equipment first. I'll just go in the order that you see them on screen here. So we'll start off with Crackerjacks, probably the worst one on the list, but you know, save the best till later, they say. Crackerjacks is a really mid arm piece that will be swapped out for Bullseye Bracers when it returns, but it does what I need it to do, which is consistently give Bolt and Shot go again, and so it sort of acts like a Snapdragon Scalers in that sense. You could try out Braces of Belief instead for now, but you will want to cry when you reveal a blue. Crackerjacks also works on other attack actions as well, which sometimes does come up if you're really trying to push for a game and still have it around. Next is the Crown of Providence, a popular choice in many Riptide lists because it allows for 5 card hands, can fix a bad hand, and also you do sometimes get caught with a bad blocking hand, or lots of traps when your opponent swings a CNC. Opting isn't really needed in this version of the deck, so we don't run the Ranger headpieces. Death Dealer is our preferred bow. It lets us go wide and can make a mid hand into a much better hand, kind of fixes everything that you need. It lets us race the aggro decks and we can outrace pretty much all of them. Dreadbore is our backup bow for when we lose faith in our Death Dealer. I have a friend that likes to try and fatigue me on Arachne, an actually bad hero, and he is always endlessly whining about this card, which automatically makes it worth playing for me. However, for you, the general audience, it gives all Bolt and Shots go again, which really helps in the fatigue games because you don't need to use up a buff at the start of the turn. We have the Quiver of Abyssal Depths. This is the standard quiver for our man Riptide. It basically acts like a copy of Remembrance and allows you to keep a high threat density in the late game. Snapdragon Scalers are our go-to boots. We want to go wide when possible, and Snapdragon Scalers just lets us do that when we draw a slightly awkward hand and we really need a bit of extra go again. Lastly, we have the Trench of Sunken Treasure, a must play in any Riptide deck. It synergizes so well with his hero ability, dodges Arsenal Disruption, and means you are never sad to Arsenal a bad card off a Ponder, as it just represents a free resource on the next turn. That also does come in very handy against Icelander as well. You may have noticed that we're not running any more than AB1, which can be found on the Trench. This is because against Kano, we just race, and against Icelander, at the minute, we take our chances until Bullseye Bracers comes back. Time for the main deck, and we'll start off with those zero cost arrows. There's just so much goodness in those little O's. I will list through the zero costs quickly. So we've got an entire playset of every colour of Bolt and Shot. We've got a playset of Drill Shot, Endless Arrow, Falcon Wing. We have Infecting Shot, an honorary arrow. We also have 3 copies of Searing Shot as well to round up our arrow count. When it comes to the Infecting Shot, having one set of 1 cost is fine. You could probably have a few more as well, but Infecting Shot is basically our biggest threat, so we run it. Overall, there's nothing unusual about these arrow choices. They are the best above rate arrows for this strategy. 2 things I like to talk about though. First is our friend over here, the blue Bolton Shot, as most decks go for blue Infecting Shot instead. It costs 0 instead of 1, so works better in more hands. It can be a natural starter that lets us go wide too. Plus, if we compare a Bolton Shot with our smallest buff, Crackerjack, to an Infecting Shot, both can be answered with a single 3 block, but Bolton Shot gives us go again, so this allows us to really go wide more often, and if our opponent doesn't want to block, the Bolton Shot can punish more frequently if we follow up with other arrows, which we kind of want to do if we're actually firing the Bolton Shot. Now, on to the elephant in the room, and no, I am not talking about Riptide himself, I am in fact talking about Intoxicating Shot, the new Riptide specialization in bright lights. You may have noticed that I do not currently run it in this version of the deck. It's a 0 cost, which we like. It hits for 4, which we like. It blocks for 3, something we also like. Its effect turns on our go again and buff traps, which is cool, but I'm never going to side in my go again traps, for example, in matchups that they're not good in just because I run Intoxicating Shot, as that is a very inconsistent plan. Intoxicating Shot shines in the endgame when you're both low on life, but if my opponent is not using go again attacks or any buffs to avoid my traps, I'm very likely going to win that game anyway, so I don't feel like I need the Intoxicating Shot there. The card also backfires a lot if you use it earlier or mid game, as that Quicken or Courage token can really be used effectively by a lot of heroes. So it is resigned to being a blue, pitch, block 3 until late. In a way, I think it's a little like the Crucible traps, where either our opponent doesn't care and just ignores it, or does care and stops it with low effort. I will say though, it is certainly a lot better than the Crucible traps. I can see this working in a slow Riptide variant for sure, but I don't think that the card works well in this aggro version at least. The blue Bolton Shot just has a lot more utility. That being said, I think maybe not maxing out on Intoxicating Shot could be an option for this deck, as that way you have a late game threat, but you won't ever clog on it and be forced to fire it early. I think it is a really cool card overall, and I will be testing it further. I just don't think it fits well into this deck right now. Whew. I'm glad I got that off my chest. Please don't roast me, Riptide aficionados. Back to the main deck now. I'll go over the buffs. So we've got 3 Lace with Blood Rot, 2 Lace with Frailty, 2 Nimblism, 3 Premeditate, 2 Razor Reflex, 3 Seek and Destroy, and we also have 3 Rain Razors. We're playing 3 of the Blood Rot, Premeditate, Rain Razors, and Seek and Destroy because I think these are your best buffs in the build. They're the most destructive and or cause the most damage. Lace with Frailty is good, but we run Frailty Trap and Codex, so we aren't really in short supply of any Frailty tokens. Nimblism is a really good flexible card that can load and buff an arrow or just buff a regular attack, but it doesn't do much on top of that, so we only run 2. It's just there for consistency. Then we also have Razor Reflex. This and Rain Razors are vital for beating fatigue. We are playing Reflex at 2 because it costs 1, so it can be a bit cloggy, but we also keep our opponent guessing whether we run 3 or not. I'm not maxing out on every buff, as that would hurt consistency. The current ratios seem to work quite well. For everyone's favourite group of cards, we're playing 3 Codex of Frailty and the 1 Codex of Blood Rot. Regarding the 3 Frailty, give me one good reason not to, and I will never play 3 again. We're playing the 1 Blood Rot because it lets you load an arrow on a 2-card hand with guaranteed Blood Pox and Ponder. So it's a good card to arsenal as well because it can load an arrow if it is already in the arsenal as per its effect. In the late game, the guaranteed Blood Pox applies a lot of pressure and helps beat fatigue, as it can also put them on a 3-card hand. I like it at 1, I used to play at 3 but felt that was quite inefficient and a bit inconsistent, so 1 feels really good. You could bump it up to 2 as well probably. For the non-arrow attacks we run 1 Down and Dirty, 3 Enlightened Strike, 3 Ravenous Rabble, and 3 Scar for a Scar. Down and Dirty, the only popper I run, but it's not really for popping. It's in here for the Assassin or Ranger matchup if they try and Codex and then say throw a Leave No Witnesses or something that we really want to block. Running more poppers conflicts with our game plan and will clog hands. Running say 6 poppers just isn't enough into draw my anyway. You could run 15 and you'd still have such a rough time, so why waste sideboard space for such a god awful matchup? Just take the L, or spend the rest of your career telling everyone how you once beat a Dromai. Oh, by the way, did I tell you guys how I once beat a Dromai? Tall tales aside, next we have E-Strike. It's just super flexible, does whatever you need it to do in this deck. Need an extra card for a huge turn? Just draw one and pop your snappies. Need a big chain ender? Whack him for 7. Need a chain starter? Whack him for 5, go again. Next is our eye for an eye mentality. We start on less life and so always get the go again pretty much. It is also great in a 2-card hand with a 0-cost arrow, as playing the Scar will load the arrow and let you shoot it because you've got go again. It's the exact same for the Rabble, except it's a free go again no matter what, at the expense of not always hitting for 4, but it mostly hits for 4 in this deck. On to everybody's favourite part of the show, we have the traps. These items of Mechanical Madness are very above rate when used at the right time. They turn Riptide into an endgame monster, as every time an opponent goes down to 2 or 3 life, they have to not only navigate playing through your attacks, but when they hit back, they must also consider that they could just die to a random Spike Pit trap. Starting off in no particular order, we have the Inertia Trap. This is great into any current aggro deck to keep them off a big follow-up turn. Great into Warrior 2, as they just can't resist buffing those attacks. Also decent versus Brute and Guardian, due to the Tectonic Hammer play, for example. And obviously Brute uses Blood Rush and a few other buffs. Frailty Trap. If you like unleashing toxic gas on your unsuspecting opponent, then this is the card for you. Also great for the aggro matchups. This form of disruption makes games in which you race into a very unfair race. It's like 2 sprinters running, but one of them is constantly smacking the other in the leg with a cane. Tar Pit Trap is nuts, turning all contract cards into vanilla damage, or stopping Katsu trigger altogether is just crazy good value. You can make CNC into a vanilla 3 damage. Just a quick note though, if you listened to that last sentence and didn't find it odd, I think that A, you need to pay more attention, and B, read Command & Conquer again. Pendulum Trap is great into mostly Warrior and Assassin, really hurts them if they're trying to fatigue you. If you block 3, ping for 1 and mill say a Codex and CNC, I can't even begin to calculate how much value you just got off that one trap. Onto the 3 legendary traps now. They're all blue and busted, just like those things hanging below Riptide's belt. You know, the heads he has tied there. Buzzsaw Trap is probably the weakest of the 3 legendary traps based on testing so far. Remember, we saved the best for later, but it generally has a useful matchup spread. Absolutely can kill an Azalea, for example, and really kind of help you get that tempo back if you're really against the wall. Collapsing Trap is absolutely bonkers and broken. It can stop an entire turn, with the 1 damage just adding a little bit of insult to injury. Spike Pit Trap, the absolute king of the endgame. I have used it to kill people from like 6 life before, and in long games you can even use it knowing precisely what is on top of your opponent's deck. But honestly, if you're that good at the game, you should probably just play Bravo, or Dromai, or consider Career as a Doctor. I don't play the other traps because the ones you need to play from Arsenal can get you killed if you draw them just as your opponent goes for a big turn, and their effects are pretty mid because either your opponent doesn't care and won't pay, or they do care and they pay at a very small inconvenience to themselves. But you already have much better disruption already anyway. Boulder Trap is solid as a rock, but I couldn't find any space for it, and I think the traps I currently run have more application in this format. Same with Blood Rot, I really like it, just couldn't find the space. The last card I want to talk about is Remembrance. This is in for fatigue. 2 has been the perfect amount in my games, as Quiver acts as a 3rd copy, but without the lack of a block. I could imagine 1 being enough, but you'd have to play extremely precisely to get away with it. Now, I am so confident in this deck that I'm just going to jump into 3 games in a row against some randomers on Talishar for some wins. Let's load up.